Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Radical Roots, How Communities are Leading the Green Transition. I'm Laura Camacho Salgado, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm thrilled to be your facilitators for this session. Born and raised in Colombia, I've worked and studied across Europe, focusing on the role of arts and culture in challenging the status quo. But today I'm speaking to you from Norway, one of the world's extractive economies, and I'm honored to be part of this critical conversation about climate justice and community-led transformation. Before we dive in, let me share a bit of context about this webinar series. This session is the part of the Tidens kulturlokaler, supported by Kulturrum. It's organized by Klimakultur, a Norwegian non-profit co-founded by Erlend Eggen and Julie Forkammer, both of whom have been fearless in addressing the issue of oil in a country where it's often treated as a taboo topic. They speak boldly about the need of intersectionality in climate action and the urgent action in the cultural sector. If it's the first time joining us, I highly recommend checking out Klimakultur website and the YouTube channel. And if you're tuning live now, feel free to share the thoughts on the questions in the chat. We'll do our best to incorporate them into the conversation. If you're here, probably you're already interested in this topic and you believe in the urgent need of climate action. Just last week, Forbes shared the list of the world's 24 richest billionaires, collectively hold of 3.3 trillion, while there are 3.6 billion people, nearly the 44% of the global population, that live below the poverty line. Why I'm saying this? The wealthiest 1%, those that are more responsible for carbon emission, continue to shape policies, economies, and the climate response funding. Yeah, we do have the COP conferences, but COP conference keep delaying real action, pushing meaningful change further down the road instead of committing to urgent climate solution. We need a green transition, we're aware of that, but under whose terms? Some Sami activists here in Norway describe some of the current climate strategies as green colonialism, a transition that often excludes indigenous and local communities from decision making. True change requires more than representation. It demands shared power in shaping solutions, because climate justice is social justice. Extraction economies are colonial, and to have a sustainable transition, we need to talk about including everyone in these solutions. We are talking about community-driven solutions, but what does a real community-led change look like? How can grassroots action change the status quo? And what is the role of the cultural sector in all of this? Today, we explore these questions with two incredible guests. I'm so happy to have them both here from France and Mexico, whose work emerged from art, culture, and community activism. And we're talking about climate justice. Both of the speakers have something in common. They are both part of the Good Enough Transformation initiative led by Trans Europe House. If you don't know the work of Trans Europe House, I suggest you to visit their website, but it's mainly 170 grassroots organizations, venues across 40 countries that they're talking about how to use art and culture in social change. The initiative of Good Enough Transformation is also global. They have members from Burkina Faso, Canada, Cyprus, Denmark, France, Morocco, Malaysia, Mexico, and Sweden. And both Fran and Eleftérios are part of those. Our speakers will begin with short presentations, and it would be followed by a conversation with them. If we're running long in this presentation, I might stop at one point because I think that the conversation would be valuable for all of us. So, first of all, I'm excited to introduce Eleftérios. Eleftérios is the director of Les Plus Petits Cirques du Monde, Centre culturel des rencontres, and specialist in artistic, cultural, and urban policies in disadvantaged areas. His work spans from intercultural dialogue, circus, theater, a little bit of everything. So, Eleftérios, we're curious, what is exactly the tiny circus in the world, and how do circus performing arts connect with climate justice? The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to meet you online. Thank you, Laura and Klimakultur to organize this moment. So I'm Eleftérios Kechagioglou. I was born in Greece and I've been living for 40 years now in France. So I'm the director of this organization called the smallest circus in the world. The organization started 33 years ago, and it's a grassroots organization founded by the inhabitants of the area. So we are in the suburbs of Paris, a working class neighborhood. And this working class red belt that used to be around Paris is a place of really innovative ways of rethinking the society. And that started, of course, already after the Second World War in the 40s and the 50s. It was very leftist engaged communities with a lot of solidarity, of course, a lot of great initiatives, a lot of about housing, about ways to connect, to work on the common good, on the public space, on solidarity in terms of social and economic help in between the community. So the idea why the circus is because circus has been a non-academic art, very open to all the communities. So we are like 15 kilometers from the center of Paris. And it was important to work in this working class area where there is almost 70% of public housing in order to build the community and have a common ground. So this question of movement and of linking together brought the circus. So we started with a circus, and then we opened to the community. We opened to the hip hop culture because we have a community coming all around the world with people coming from French West Indies, from Africa, from also the Indian Ocean. So it was a way to connect people, to also give to the children and the young persons the capacity to access artistic practices, to do things together, to get empowerment, and to find ways to not be in addictions. We are also in an area that went after the economic crisis to addictions, to drug dealing. So all these issues that we can know in Europe, but also, of course, in all these Western countries were here. And so this question of circus was more about social justice, about how can we bring new motivation to the young people, to the communities to work together. 33 years after, we are now a quite big organization. We have a beautiful circus of 28 meters high, built by a famous architect and urban planner called Patrick Bouchin. And Patrick Bouchin has been working for more than 40 years in social engaged architecture. So how can we build spaces for the communities with the communities, where the communities, they have an active role, not only to co-design, to co-think, but also to participate. What does it mean, participation? Participation is how people, they can be there during the work. So we have been built our beautiful building 10 years ago, and for 20 months it has been open for the visitors to work on that, to bring projects with arts. For example, young teenagers and kids have been writing poems that are now on our buildings. Musicians and young musicians have been cooperating to create an opera that has been sung for the opening of the building, and all these questions. And that was the moment when we understood that we cannot stay only on our performing arts prerogatives. It was important to open to what's happening. So we are an area that we're under big renovation process, because we have almost 80% of public housing. Of this public housing has been built in the 50s and the 60s. So we have these massive concrete buildings that came from them by that time to give a solution to the favelas that were installed in this area. But we know that after all this year, this public housing haven't been renovated, and so there were a lot of social and economic issues that made that there was a lot of unprivileged communities living in the area. The unemployment came. So we were obliged in a way to open our eyes, open the new building, and understand what was valued by the community. That was 10 years ago. And by that moment, we also started to understand, also through the artists, what was really happening in terms of climate change, in terms of threatening, of course, the cohesion of the society. And this climate change in these disadvantaged areas is also very linked with the question of social injustice, of the possibility of not having access in even fundamental things like equal rights for education, equal rights for access to art, and all this. So what for the last years we have been working to obtain a national recognition, and now we are the first national center in France that is working on the heritage of the peripheries. So this question of the peripheries, it means a lot about this question of suburban working class areas where there are a lot of things that are main issues. One of these issues is, of course, also climate and social change. Why is it so important? Because these areas around the big metropolis like Paris has been also green areas where for several years there will be more open space. And now through the gentrification, the fact that the metropolis is getting bigger, we have all these issues, how to protect the spaces and how to make people aware of the questions of biodiversity, the question of climate change, when all these populations, they are facing already the issues of poverty, of not equal access to employment and to education. So for the past 5 years, we have been working internationally, of course, with all the partners. We are an active member of Trans-Europal in develop a new way of bringing together architects, landscape architects, people from urban planning, artists, decision makers, and of course the citizens, and to work in grassroots solutions that we can put together. To give you an example and to pass the micro to Fran, is that we're working with all the urban gardening movement and the green transition movement in our city. So Bagneux, our city, is very active in this question of green transition. There's a deputy mayor about green transition and urban gardening. And we work with the communities, with other organizations. How can the kids, the children, the teenagers can be part of this, how they can understand what's happening, how they can be involved in urban gardening, how can they be involved in the green transition of their schools. And also we work on this level, on international level, but I'm going to pass the micro to Fran so that he can explain his work, which is great, and then we can go on more with the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleftérios, and thank you for sharing that. And we will go back to the conversation. But as you're saying, le plus petit Cirque du Monde, it has all this the community-led practices as a DNA of the organization, and it, as you're saying, it goes from every detail from what is happening 33 years ago, and that's why it's so interesting to have it also here connected with social justice and climate justice. So with that, thank you. And then we will go through, I have some questions. But next we'll hear from Fran Erazo, joining from Mexico, where I believe the sun is still just rising. Thank you for waking up so early. Fran is the co-founder of Culturans, a Mexico City-based NGO that blends art, culture, and social innovation to create sustainable, and it seems like weird to say, but human-centered cities. Where is the human in the cities? He has a background in art, architecture, philosophy, urbanism. And hola, Fran. We're eager to hear about Culturans and how the nature-based agricultural heritage can connect with the global network. Thank you.
Hola, Laura. Thank you, and to Klimakultur team for the invitation. Very happy to be part of this webinar with Eleftérios. Hello, all. So I am Fran. I am a member of Culturans, which is an NGO based in Mexico City. And first, I will quickly share about our approach and then share about our contribution to the good enough transformation. Can we get the slides on? I don't know if, yeah, fantastic. Great. So Culturans works, we like to say, with the humanity of cities. And we seek to reframe what urban development means by inspiring people with a simple idea, that cities are not just growing clusters of buildings and roads, but collaborative fields of valuable human and social relations that create and build thriving places which don't happen yesterday, but span centuries, which hold fascinating stories of people across time and space. Next, please. So that is the intent behind a kind of cultural urbanism, if you will, or a renaissance of cities that uses culture as a powerful tool to make them. And that is where our creative citizens approach comes from. It proposes that anyone, regardless of knowledge or background or origin, anyone who cares about their neighbors and is driven by curiosity, imagination, a sense of place, can and does play a part in creating a better quality of life and in shaping sustainable solutions to shared problems. So this approach proposes that art and culture are capable of revealing and communicating people's imaginations, dreams, concerns, stories, and identities, and from there build a bridge to scientific efforts, technological innovations, and to climate and sustainability agendas, which sometimes are otherwise meaningless and obscure to quote-unquote ordinary people. So next, please. For example, this approach has led us to build creative conversations, particularly to serve marginalized and peripheral places and reimagining them as hotbeds of new possibilities. For example, by creating healthy urban hubs that connect formerly isolated health facilities and the expertise of their populations into their neighborhoods. Next, please. Or by creating public spaces that can tell the deep story of a place and open up what could be, like Caracol de Viento, which was a recyclable pavilion that proposes a dialogue between the pre-colonial Mesoamerican cosmology and contemporary eco-technologies to enhance the everyday experience of a crowded historic plaza and link place identity with environmental action. Next, please. So this search for communication between the past, the present, and the future of cities has led us to the good enough transformation. And it begins with the story of our own city. And I never get tired of telling this story. 700 years ago, the vast concrete jungle of Mexico City today was radically different. It was a cluster of green settlements thriving on a lake with a unique urban system that intertwined food production, navigation canals, and the natural landscape of a wetland. Next, please. Then it all changed, not only because of the colonization process, which we all know what that means, but because of the old modern dream of a new nation and its crazy rapid development that in fact brought great prosperity, but it also literally drained the lake's ecosystem. And in just 70 years, Mexico City's uncontrolled, massive sprawl erased the lake ecosystem from its memory. It was surely one of the greatest modern eco-urban tragedies, not only compared to the fact that few citizens of Mexico City remember this story today. Next, please. So not all is lost. a small oasis south of the city, where the urban and the rural meet in the periphery, is the last standing vestige of such a green lost city. Filled with diverse life forms and with a unique agricultural system, the Chinampas of Xochimilco face and resist the huge urbanization pressures of the city on all fronts. And since at least the 70s or the 80s, there has been great efforts to protect this area. And indeed, there are regulations in place to help. However, a growing movement of civil society and grassroots communities led by farmers, families, organizations, collectives, and cooperatives is the driving force of the regeneration of the Chinampas and the recovery of the lake city. Next, please. As part of the good enough transformation, we have joined the Chinampa movement to learn from it and to help connect, imagine, and showcase its potential. That is, Chinampas not only as an agricultural nature-based heritage and the much needed ecosystem conservation effort, but as a potential to radically shift the imagination of what a city is, away from the gray monster and closer to the green city we really want, rooted in community and nature. A potential that may hold answers for a new way forward for urban living system in the face of today's urban problems: water, millions of people in deprived peripheries, health, and of course, climate change. Next, please. So in close collaboration with very strong community of practice, those who cultivate and protect the Chinampas, we have been advocating for a cultural laboratory for the future of city basin at Chinampa. Such a laboratory seeks to integrate efforts for sustainable food production, regeneration of ecosystemic services, and the development of innovations that range from alternative economic models to urban policies. But more importantly, to connect and create encounters that unite the efforts within the Chinampas and link the Chinampas with the city and with other communities elsewhere. Next, please. So just to give some examples, these are some of the concrete actions of what we call a cultural testbed in connection with local experts and communities. We have gone from learning about traditional ways in which the Chinampas are actually built, forming a cycle between water, soil, plant, and air, and envisioning them as urban-scale biofilters and islands of fertility. We have learned from the teachings of Chinamperos like Don Dionisio, who advocates for the creation of a new science that combines the empirical Chinampa knowledge and the scientific laboratory. We have tested expansions to the Chinampa concept to, for example, design new models that use tourism and creative industries as tools. And we have also learned from the cooking practice of Nora Estrada, who says that if Chinampas are alive, they must be on the mouth. This creates climate, the notion that climate action efforts are linked to the economic and cultural ones, because there is an urgent need for new kinds of markets and educational spaces that connect the Chinampas to the homes of citizens. All of these practices must be grounded in a strong layer of cultural belonging and identity, from community life, which recognizes that ancestral family ties to the land are needed to welcome the new ones to a city, to the cultural traditions such as the world-famous Day of the Dead that opens up a portal between the future and the past of human connections, and also between natural and cultural cycles. Next, please. So Project Chinampa and the Chinampa city is an ongoing adventure of hope and inspiration, and a conversation that seeks to engage people from Mexico City and from other cities in the world. Kind of an open forum where farmers, scientists, teachers, planners, and especially young people, the next generation of Chinamperos, to think and dream about the sustainable city. A shared vision of a city transformed from the ground up, made for a community that cares from the minds and hearts of the roots of people within, and protects its boundaries from the pressure of the grey urban monster, and perhaps then able to grow to other corners of our larger city or other cities around the world, guided by the idea of what the voices of the Chinampa says, that the city must remember that it has a heart of a Chinampa, where its strength comes from. So, thank you.
thank you for the presentation. And then I think, and I will also call now the Eleftérios also to be part of the conversation now, because this both projects, even though they're so different and different backgrounds and geographies, and both of you're putting into the center what it had been remained peripheral, and in this process of inverting categories, because in one side we have the for example, now knowing that you're doing like the heritage of the first National Center of Heritage of the Periphery from one side, Eleftérios, and is what was remained peripheral in the one of the centers of the Western heart empire, like Paris, and then there's the periphery that it had been invisible, and then and on the other side we have Fran with the putting highlight in the knowledge of the Chinampa, and both physically, both projects in the periphery of cities, that both of you advocate this kind of periphery that it was a green. It was green. It was something that it was peripheral in the cities, and in this kind of prosperity of cities, it was eliminating green. And then in both ways, you're shifting the attention to those knowledge, with thus rewriting in a memory, but also the action. And then so it's really nice how both intertwine. But at the same time, both of you're really rooted to their communities. And when we're talking about these projects, especially now, and probably people that they're listening, is how do we talk about the local and the global, no? How can the global networks, like you're doing good enough transformation, can support a community-led action without appropriation or dilution and knowledge that is so rooted to the local? It's always this kind of, how can you communicate with other countries and all global that without diluting this knowledge? So that's my question. Like in both projects, it's understanding that it's so community-led, it's really rooted, but how do you work now that you're working internationally? I don't know who want to start.
I can. So I think what we are looking for is to connect, of course, with other projects that are running around the world, because it's very important to change the perspectives and, of course, to change the narratives, because we had for several years just one way of narrative, which is the narrative of, let's say, the Western world, and now through globalization, that is a common narrative about this question of modernity, of progress, and this question of the peripheries and the center. So what we needed is, and the Trans-Europalis has been a great network, and is still a great network, because grassroots communities, they can meet and they work on these issues. So for several years, we have been considered as the people only concerned by performing arts. But from the very beginning, our vision is to work on this question of celebration and question of the cultures of the communities, music, theater, the circus, the acrobatics, to really face social issues. So we didn't choose the climate change, but we are facing, and now, especially where we have a lot of extreme right governments all around the world that are denying this question, which is really now very, very heavily in front of our door. We need to connect. And I think, of course, all the communities, they know what is happening in a way. We saw also through the pandemic also what was happening. So it's something global. And how do we use what we learn in our communities? I think this was one important question. I can give you an example, is first to give value what we do, for example, and what we put in common with the Good Enough Transformation Project was to revisit and to walk around all these areas, meet with the people, listen to the stories, better understand the details, and then bring with us the public and private also stakeholders in order to see what's happening. Because it's one thing to know that a site is polluted, and it's another thing to go and see the pollution, face the pollution. Understand now this pollution will not stay where you put it, but will diffuse. That the problems of lacking of water will not stay at one place, but will be expanded. So this is very strong to see that the problems now are really globalized. And the solution, they are both local, but they are also localized. They are also globalized. I mean, of course, we don't have the same community here as in Mexico, but we have almost exactly the same issues on a different level. So this is very important to see and to work with that. So I learned so much when I was in Mexico and Xochimilco. I can take one thing that I really understand and that we'll work on that. How can you put together this local knowledge? For example, Don Dionisio, he knows very well this ancestral knowing of taking care of the earth of Xochimilco, and he works also for a specialist. So how can we build more attractive narratives and possibilities for the future, linking together all the expertise? Because for 100 years, we say there is only science where there is expertise, and we put down the expertise of the citizens, of the people that knows how to live, how can they react, how can they find solutions, even if you have very few means. So this is very important to go back and understand, and maybe go back to the peripheries and see from the peripheries what can you reveal, what kind of solutions can you find to go further on.
Do you want to add something to that, Fran, or?
Yeah, very quick. I mean, I completely agree. So back to the question is how do we connect the community with the global? How does it happen, and what are the challenges about that? For us, more than a challenge is precisely what is exciting about the project, like the Good Enough Transformation, and it links precisely to what Eleftérios is saying, to giving value and to acknowledging all the answers that are already there and are so isolated and sometimes forgotten, and are extremely valuable. The wealth of diverse knowledge that is just, it might be around any corner of the world, and so it's about giving value, opening the perspective. And these communities, for example, here in Mexico, but I know this is the case elsewhere, there is a readiness to be open and to get noticed and to communicate with the world. And they just get so excited by the notion that their struggle, their message is universal, and it resonates with the suburbs in Paris, for example, but also with what happens in Malaysia, or that there is a common understanding beyond the differences. That is extremely powerful. And again, this idea of using the power of the networks to build infrastructures of support and value, and that otherwise some communities won't have, because, I don't know, I mean, in some contexts in the so-called global south, it is a well-known fact that institutions sometimes don't work and are not able to understand the subtlety of certain things and problems and values. So we have discovered over and over again that we need to build these international kind of infrastructures, which are built by civil society actors. And again, here's the powerful idea of transgroup right? The connection between different community-based civil society organizations that collaborate beyond borders. So I would say it's a massive asset to thinking globally about connecting different points of very local and very valuable knowledge, practices, etc.
Yeah, thank you both, because both of you are talking into this kind of like the struggles they're entertaining. This is like, it's connecting already the struggles, also solutions, they might be also connected. And then both of you, you're talking a lot about this kind of reshifting narratives and the role of cultural sector that we have in reshifting narratives, rethinking what is knowledge, because also, as you're both mentioning, knowledge has been always been boxed in an academic, scientific way. Rethinking what is knowledge is already decolonialized knowledge, but also, like you're saying, it's bringing visible what it has been there, but with nuances, and that's the cultural sector has the role in this, because it's something that might be even easier for artists, even easier for cultural organizers. And as your Eleftérios, you're saying, it's not that you choose climate action. It's like climate action, they're choosing us. It's not like we're kind of decide if we're working about that or not. We cannot do art in a, well, the climate is collapsing. So this kind of is really this urgency that is calling these projects. And then with that, because you, both of you, your organization, that you're already working with communities, and that's part of the DNA, and a lot of Trans-Europe hosts, also there's like grassroots organizations. But I'm just wondering if people that are listening to us, for example, are saying like, we do believe in community-based practices, but maybe they don't have their experiences. And then sometimes when we're talking about community-led practices, there's a lot of time that you need to also to engage with communities, because this is the process, and it should be with time, because it's important that it's it take it with care. But at the same time, how do you tackle climate action that we need to do something with urgency and give enough time to work respectfully with communities? Do you have any kind of like practices that you want to share, or not only, because I know that both of you have been doing for a long time, but maybe there's some practices that you could share with people that maybe they're not has that experience that you have, something for our audience?
Regarding this question of urgency
Yeah,
versus the time needed for change.
exactly. Like, how
Yeah.
do you balance like the urgency of climate action, and at the time that you need to build trust when you're in with communities, in a way, like these two things that they go by hand?
Yeah, I mean, we have discovered that it has to do with acknowledging and recognizing and envisioning scales of time and separating the problems, because when we say climate, it's so many problems united there, or when we say city, it's like a cluster of dimension of problems. And sometimes we have noted that just because it is urgent, sometimes we need to step back and think and plan and make strategies, and don't fall into the panic, and understand what happened. For example, for the narrative of this city, for example, it must be understood from our point of view, from what it was, which we took some choices the last century, beginning of the last century, or the turn of from the 18 to the 19, or sorry, to the 19th to the 20th century, which were good, but were made with a different vision of what we need today. So just the patience to build the right vision of where we want to go, this takes time. And we need to a kind of a patience to understand that cities themselves or climate action are long-term projects, actually. Also, we need to understand that people won't take care of larger problems unless they are able to get away from their personal urgencies, and other times from egotistic mindsets, which are often found in privileged spaces, curiously enough, like at academia, not so much in the peripheries. But time and time again, we go to this question, and I don't know if in the case of PPCM, I think this is also the case, but the projects turn into having this kind of strong educational component, and working with youth, for example, with all the communities, just to take the time to build and align the right mindset, to take the time to build the right vision. And here's also where the power of community-based action work comes, because they start small, they start slowly, they have already woven practices that could be built up. But again, we should, we think, start again, like in the schools and at the homes, like in the small spaces of where society and small communities are built, to start this change. But we need to acknowledge that we need kind of patience to do it.
Yes, I think, of course, it's important, and I agree, of course, with Fran, to see that we have to work really on the small scale. So ideally, we are maybe tomorrow we're going to be more and more to work on that, and in a way, it's what's happening in a way, because there are a lot of the young generation. Not only understands, but they are inside. They are born in this new world where things are happening. So I think this way to work with the children and the young generation, it's very important, because they go faster, they understand what's happening. Of course, we're not sure that we're going to succeed, but this is also the reason we know that we have to act. We cannot stay like this. We know that it's important, that it gives value to our everyday life. Otherwise, we stop everything and we say everything is going to collapse. So this is one scenario, but no historical scenario has been done the way we thought it was meant to be. So it's a lot of things that are already unexpected, and nobody waited the pandemic to come, and the pandemic made a lot of changes that were, of course, ephemeral, and then the world started again. But on the other hand, it was not only ephemeral. We saw that something big can happen every time, and by that time, the community, the people around, the resources that are easier accessible are the ones that are more valuable. So this question is very important. If we think about the creative and artistic sector, it's very important to understand now that we are not anymore in this model that maybe was the model of the late 19th or the beginning of the 20th century, what was more about education. By that time, maybe only 10% of the population of Western countries were really educated. And we thought that through education, we are going to build a better world. But we saw what happened, of course, through the big wars. So we know that it's always the world is not balanced, and that we have also to prepare ourselves to be ready for times where it's harder and for times where we can build solutions. So it's not maybe, unfortunately, to completely avoid, because we're not capable to completely avoid the climate change, but we can learn, we can adapt, we can find the ways how to build the capacity of the communities to find solutions, to bring other ways to think. And then by this level, the global change, sometimes they come very quickly. I'll give you an example. In the big architectural schools in Paris, almost 95% of the students that are graduating now, they present projects where they don't build something new, they just renovate already buildings that are still there. So this change is very big, and we can find it all around the world. And a lot of performing artists now, they want really to speak about what is happening, to really have a conversation, not to be performers and then have the audience, but to have a conversation with the people and see what is the possibility to give again empowerment, to give again capacity to act, even to do small acts that we like the main capitalistic system say they have no value because they don't add money value, but they have a lot of value because if they can give you back some strength, some capacity to be more positive, to find solutions, to give solidarity, these are bigger solutions than the solutions that go only through economic value. So I think there is a lot, and there is more and more, in a way, unfortunately, every day because of the global collapse. On the other hand, we can say, fortunately, we are more open to understand and to do things.
Thank you, because I think sometimes, like both Fran, you're saying, like even if it's urgent, it doesn't mean that we cannot step back and take a breath and act. And also, Eleftérios, you're saying, like, it's also in those small acts that we have agency. And sometimes when we're talking about climate action, sometimes we feel of hope, being hopelessness because we cannot do as much as, or because it make people freeze because it's too big. And you're saying, like, this is about small acts, because also it's like the recognition that all of us, we have agency. And this community-based, all small scale, also they have their value. And then maybe also the way of that, as we're measuring in value, it had been also colonized in our minds. It's about ego, it's about success, like you're saying, it's about individual worth, and all of that. That it's already then the process of rethinking that is already rethinking and decolonize result or a decolonize strategy. And then also it's these community-led actions is also is the best example to say, like, we understand that there's not one size fits all. This does not work. This is not like it's something that is not going to fix. That's why there's a lot of these treaties that they don't say nothing, because how can we follow up? And it's there's not a quick fix, like you're saying. So it's also about, like, we need time, because this quick fix that we could do in 6 months, they're not going to happen, and that takes time. So it's and it gave me a lot of hope when Eleftérios, you're saying, like, when you were working with the youth, sometimes we realize that this give hope, because, for example, the architecture students that thinking about architecture in a sense of degrowth. So it's sometimes when we're talking about cultural sector, we're speaking to people that they're being in the cultural sector for a long time, and they're using the way they're used to do the same one, or in the architecture or urban planning. But then when you're talking, for example, with community work and also with youth voices, a lot of people would say, like, yeah, we could change, it doesn't matter. So that gives a little bit of hope. And then that as another question that maybe people should have now is, like, it is possible to join the Good Enough Transformation Network. How does it work if a person wants to follow you around? Like, because there's a lot of, we're having 2 projects and we have really reduced time to talk, and I would love them to explore everything that you're doing, but also maybe to ignite people to join your network or to follow what you're, like, how do people would do? Like, what's the next step for people that they're listening?
Just reach out. We like to see the Good Enough Transformation as an invitation, really. So reach out and let's explore how we can collaborate. That's the beauty, I think, of these conversations through networks. And can I just add to the previous point, just very quickly? You said you needed time. I think we also, and this is why we also need culture, in the sense that culture has a super special power and connection to people to showcase what is possible. Like, this vision of culture as a testbed of possibilities, it's massively important, I would say. We often say that we're in a time that maybe more than reasoning and science and technology, we lack imagination and we lack emotion. And this is where doing stuff through circus, for example, with BPCM or through festivals, etc., those things culture can inspire. There is this open question about how to make the sustainability, green, climate actions world profoundly attractive and passionate and joyful and fun to people. And we all know there is too much either negative narrative or a narrative of a tough and almost lost struggle. It is tough, but we need inspiration. So again, we like to think about the good enough transformation as a way to inspire and to showcase what is possible, but in the very way that we have also been inspired by the communities that we're learning from.
So it, of course, it happens that just in 10 minutes we have an online conversation with all the partners, the actual partners of Good Enough Transformation, how to go on. Because Good Enough Transformation is co-funded by the Nordic Fund. So, and we are really very, very keen to apply for a new project, a bigger one. So please join us. You can also join Mike, the managing director of Trans-Europal. You can send us a message because we really would like to connect with other organizations. And this is very important because, for example, we met with Fran Erazo through Good Enough Transformation, and now we are running another big project linking the French West Indies, Guadeloupe, French Guyana, Mexico, and it's almost the same issue. It's called Together, and it's a project where we try to find collective solutions about this question, how the communities can imagine rebuild their area, especially working class and privileged areas where there are a lot of things to do, and how can small scale solutions can be the starters, can be the teasers in order to bring bigger solutions. I saw also on the chat this question from Ireland about how do we introduce bigger questions in small communities. Who are you cooperating with? So my answer will be with everybody. And we are going to see that we can find even more than everybody. I think for us, it's been very important to see that we have to cooperate with everybody, which is almost also both human and transhuman. It has also to cooperate with the landscape, how it is, to understand why it is like that, if it's abandoned, and of course to work directly with the people, to meet them, to be there, to work with all the organizations that are involved in our areas, to go and meet them, and not to go on this sector collaboration. For example, a cultural organization will work only with cultural organizations. It's very important today. It's more and more important to go out and to have a conversation. And I think it's going to be, unfortunately, more and more important to go also have a conversation with really people that are really on the bad for us part, the extreme right movement all around the world, to see, because we need to conversate, otherwise it will be a civil war. So it's very important to bring all these people together. And then in terms of to introduce big questions, I think big questions are coming because first we create links with the people. Secondly, we go for everyday solutions of everyday issues. So somehow can we improve this small garden? How can we improve the education of the young people and all this? And then the bigger subjects are coming from that. I think it's not possible to speak only with the big subjects if we are facing already the small issues. When I get out of time, I pass the micro to Fran.
Just very quickly, I think also you don't introduce the big questions. Big questions are already there, I would say, or the seed of big questions. Sometimes it's a matter of finding the right language. And I think that this also relates to what Eleftérios was saying, the complication of joining sectors. I mean, everybody wants to be, interdisciplinary or whatever. We're lacking seriously languages and ways into relating with different people, with different mindsets, different stories, different places. So there is, again, the question of time there. We need to take the time to understand properly and create a language that builds trust. Again, culture has a way of building this because it's emotional. It's not just about concepts. It's not just about agendas that come from out, but creating dialogues that are relatable from within, I would say. And the big questions are already there in the communities, I would say.
Yes, I think what we could add is that the policymakers, they need now this connection. They need us in a good way because they lost this connection, because they have been working for several years only in the offices, sometimes putting a lot of energy, sometimes putting a lot of money without really understanding what's happening. But they didn't use to get from the communities what happened because they thought that they knew better than the communities. And this now is changing almost all around the world, where the decision makers need to understand better what is happening really on the ground.
Yeah, and that's, I think it's a great way to finish this conversation, because it's like you're saying, it's not only about including people in the table, but also taking them as equals and then give that power. So that's the things, and sometimes this kind of distrust that this kind of, before this logic, like policy makers, like inviting people from communities to the table in the participatory part, and then not giving credit or not giving the power. So it's this tokenism in the climate sector is happening also. So that's really important, because like you're doing, it's like, it's not about inviting them to the table. It's like not being everyone in the same ground. And that is the important. And then and also the, like what you're saying also at the end about communication, because it's like, okay, we need to work with everyone, but also we have to find ways to speak the same languages, or to not even speak the same language, but allow other languages to go in. Because at the end, it's talking about communication. How do we stop preaching to the choir? How we are all of us in echo chambers? How do we amplify these voices without transforming them or appropriating them? So this is interesting, like working with diverse voices, then maybe we are speaking different languages, but it's still communicated. The role of arts and the role of people, for example, now attending to this seminar, say like, it is about also either hopefully joining this initiative, or the initiatives that Fran or Eleftérios will continue having, because I feel like you're having so many initiatives. So being them with them and collaborate, but also if not, that also, how do we amplify it? How we use this knowledge to connect with others? How do we share your findings? So this is an invitation for everyone seeing this to either collaborate or use your voice. And thanks a lot for joining today in part of this webinar series. We are so happy to have you both, because you have both like different expertise, but also like reverting the center periphery is really important, and all the inspiring work that you're doing, especially for us in Norway, that we do need this inspiration to talk about climate action in the cultural sector, in a context in which Norway rely in oil and gas, and there is a lot of taboo around that. So it's really interesting to have other voices. Thank you for inspiring us, and thank you everyone for joining in this conversation. And thank you, Klimakultur.
Thank you.
Thank you.